Currently in Virtual Earth Local Area Datasphere. Tuesday, December 28th, 3115. Serenity and I became aware inside one of the simulated reality project's standard-looking virtual lobbies. We arrived alone, but only had to wait a few seconds before my daughter Kayla joined us. My virtual iris's real-time chronometer indicated that our awarenesses had actually been suspended for the many minutes it had taken for her to arrive. I had set my internals to limit such time since fiddling, but here in the SRP, Kayla, and possibly Omu or Naomi, would have the authority to override my preferences. "Father, niece, welcome to the SRP," Kayla said, stepping close to receive hugs. "Nice to see you again, daughter. I hope you are well, especially with all the recent excitement regarding the SRP," I replied, referring to the recent alien downloads. "It's been interesting," she said neutrally. The grin on her avatar's face betrayed that she was having the time of her life. Our reunion was interrupted by a new figure materializing into view near Kayla. It was the truncated cone-shaped glyph that Xenius AI typically used to represent its active presence. "Greetings, human representations. I will be attending your meeting with the reanimated intelligence of Hemru origin to provide translation services as needed," the artificial intelligence responsible for interactions with the alien said. "Understand that despite the alien entity's accelerated learning, there are areas where its familiarity with your language is lacking. In those instances, I will provide the necessary context." "Shaka when the walls fell," I muttered to myself. Serenity looked at me curiously, but I shook the comment away. I felt my simulated nerve endings almost shivering from the excitement my mentality was projecting. I was going to meet a true alien. "Dad, I would like to bring my friend Pickett along to the meeting also. Would that be okay?" At first, I thought that including Pickett was a good idea. Even though he was only a severely redacted version of an assemblage member, the enemy operative would give us an additional point of view on the alien, and might provide unique insights. It would also be interesting to witness how the Hemru reacted to the presence of the assemblage agent. Then how Kayla had described Pickett finally registered. "Friend?" I said with the age-old raised eyebrow look typical of an inquisitive and protective parent. Kayla's avatar looked almost embarrassed. Yes, we've become close over the past few months of his internment. I've, come to have feelings for him." I scrambled to come up with an appropriate reply. My first response was one of concern, but rather than grill Kayla for details and simultaneously projecting my fears and prejudices, I had a better source for information. "Naomi," I subvocalized, "is it safe for Kayla and Pickett to be involved?" "Yes, John. If by involved you mean emotionally bonded. I am thoroughly monitoring the virtual thought patterns of the Pickett persona here in the simulated reality project. I conclude he has accepted the reality of the situation here and has indicated no subversive or hostile patterns," the AI answered in my head. "Does he?" I started to ask before Naomi continued. "His template was made human enough that he has developed genuine affectionate feelings towards Kayla. I have detected nothing in his thoughts or actions which would warrant intervention. I have therefore respected Kayla's right to privacy and thus far kept you uninformed of their developing relationship." Well, shit. Now how to respond to my daughter? I guess that would be fine, Kayla," I replied awkwardly. I was smart enough to quickly add, "I'm happy for you, really. It's good that you found someone to care about." Omu chose that moment to appear in the virtual lobby. As always, her image of near perfection momentarily took my breath away. She grinned at the group and approached to take my hand in hers. "John would love to have Pickett accompany us, Kayla. I will attempt to keep him from making too much of an ass of himself," Omu said with her almost sultry voice. As she had spoken, she'd also patted my hand in hers like a nurse consoling a patient. I was also a bit miffed that Omu had known about Kayla's love interests, before I realized that she could have also just learned the news and understood my likely responses almost instantly. The others laughed at the android's comment. Well, all except Xenius. The icon of the AI remained stoic, passively observing our byplay. It occurred to me that humanity's primary AI responsible for understanding alien behavior probably struggled just as much understanding humanity's own awkward and confusing interactions. I took a deep breath as the image of Pickett appeared next to Kayla and took my daughter's hand. The human-appearing avatar of the enemy agent had a small smile on his face as he nodded towards me in greeting. I took another breath to calm myself. I never really understood why that worked in virtual, but it did. Kayla falling in love with the sole on-site representative of the enemy of all mankind was not optimal, to say the least. I wasn't sure how the public would react if and when the news leaked. But I suppose it could have been worse. At least Kayla had not gone the route that Jonathan had taken and fallen in love with his android companion. Omu chose that exact moment to squeeze my hand. I almost flinched as I looked at her and our joined hands. Her virtual image was smirking at me as if she knew what I had just been thinking. Ugh, no way! No matter how intuitive my companion was, there was no way I would accept that Omu could know what I'd been thinking. I would like to... I started speaking at the same time as Kayla. Before we enter, yes, Dad? Kayla asked. I'm sorry, Kayla. I apologize. Before we go in, I'd like to meet the Hemru on my own. I'll try not to take too long. Pickett in Serenity frowned. Kayla's expression remained neutral, but she was nodding and smiling. That is what I was going to say, she replied. The Hemru has also requested that she be allowed to present herself to you in private before the rest of us enter her virtuality. Also, there will be one additional member joining our party. That person had not yet arrived in virtual, but will be along shortly. Oh, who is that? I asked. Let's keep it a surprise for now. You will see soon enough after your private introduction with the Hemru is finished. I suspected the surprise would be Kayla's mother, Ux's. I could see my former wife being interested in both meeting the alien and in my reactions to it. If it was her arriving late, she was probably delayed, waiting on a secured communications wormhole. Dad, the Hemru also requested that for your initial meeting, no AIs attend. I told it that this would be your call. Interesting. Was a truly private meeting even possible here in the virtuality of the SRP? This place depended upon the control of Dionys AI after all. Naomi, are you monitoring? I asked openly. Yes, John, Naomi said with its standard voice. As it spoke, her previous sunflower avatar appeared next to the inverted cone representing Xanius AI. Is it possible for me to meet with the Hemru without any AIs observing? No, John. I can, if you so order it, exclude all others, but at a minimum, I will have to be involved to maintain the simulation. So be it. I was not sure that I wanted to meet with the Hemru alone anyway. It was not that I was afraid, as it would still be a virtual meeting. No, it was more that I wanted witnesses, and possibly advice from something less emotional and more patient, I realized. Naomi could be a safety check that I did not commit humanity in some stupid way. Okay, we will do it that way. I'd like Omu to attend with me also, though. Xanius AI spoke up. I have transferred my basic Hemru translation matrix, including the recent improvements, to Naomi. With that, its avatar went dull as it took itself offline. Kayla, I know you and the AIs have already met with the Hemru many times. Do you have any advice? I asked. Just be yourself, and remember that although the Hemru is not human, it is a logical, thinking, intelligent being. You'll be fine. I nodded, and after a glance at Omu, signaled that we were ready. Instead of walking into a next room, the lobby faded out as we were transported into a completely new virtuality. We appeared on a large rocky outdoor plateau, which overlooked a broad valley. It felt unearthly, and the visible plant life was strange and unknown. I quickly realized the colors were also off. The sky, plants, and even the rocks seemed odd, almost alien. I chuckled to myself as I looked up to confirm that the sun in this place was different. Its light was harsher and had a strange reddish tint. The skies, while still blue, had a subtly different hue, maybe a slight greenish tinge. This iteration must be a representation of the Hemru homeworld. I was not sure why that surprised me, but it did. I wondered for a moment if the alien had chosen its surroundings to put me at a disadvantage of some sort, but then realized that it was not important. Ahead of us, a path led into a dome-like canopy constructed of an organic-looking material. The structure had a deep, hooded, arched entry, which revealed little of its dark interior. Omu led the way and started toward the canopy. I was sure she was fully aware of what we would find inside, having already interfaced with the AI advisory group. I started to follow and immediately felt myself growing lighter as I walked. The sensation of change stopped after only a few meters, leaving me feeling roughly 20% lighter than normal. The Hemru homeworld apparently had less gravity than our world. I had a sudden thought and took a deep breath. The air smelled the same as it always did, which meant the Hemru homeworld had a similar atmosphere as the Earth, or this simulation, or my perception of it, did not distinguish atmospheric differences. Either way, it seemed normal, and I dismissed my worries about suffocation. We reached the entry to the canopy where a dark, organic-looking iris barrier opened to permitting our passage. Its motion had been silent and more than just a little spooky. Inside the domed chamber was an illuminated central circle, surrounded by a darker outer perimeter. Standing at the far edge, just beyond the circle of light, was a humanoid figure which must have been the Hemru. The dim lighting obscured its features, but I was able to make out that it had a feminine-looking shape. To each side of the figure were the faintly glowing icon representations of the various human-controlled AIs. There were 5 present, and as I scanned them, I realized they were the 5 I'd expected to have an interest regarding the alien. First was Eudaimonia, the AI responsible for general human development. Minervus, our defensive AI, was next. It was followed by Praxia, our warlord AI responsible for offensive operations against the assemblage. Next was Dionys, the AI who ran the simulated reality project. And last, Xenius, the AI tasked with all things Hemru. All the AI icons were dull and static, indicating that they were currently offline. I wondered if they were normally constantly active and interacting with the alien. Maybe that was why it requested that I meet it without their presence. I knew I'd be tired of the attention if it were me. "Naomi, you're still online. If so, please show yourself," I whispered. The sunflower image of my arch AI revealed itself. The icon was a brilliant yellow and green, and its leaves shimmered slightly, betraying that it was fully active and present. The still shrouded Hemru noted the arrival of the new AI and stepped forward into the circle of light to more closely examine Naomi's icon. Its obvious curiosity over the animated sunflower made me suspect that this was the first time Naomi had revealed itself to the Hemru. Its movement into the light also allowed me to finally see its features clearly. I almost laughed out loud. Standing in the circle of illumination was a nude, feminine-looking, very human-like figure. What was amusing to me was that there were 2 notable differences. The first was that it was bald and had a clear gray-green pallor to its skin tone. The second difference, and the one that had caused my near gaffe, was that the figure had 2 large antennae sprouting from its head, and I thought I recognized the antennae. At first I thought they were antennae like the character from that old show, My Favorite Martian, but upon looking closer, they more resembled the Andorrans from that old Star Trek TV show. "Oh, Moo," I subvocally whispered. "What's up with the antennae? Did the Hemru really look like this in reality?" I'd heard from the early reports that they were an insect-like species. Even with the antenna, this pseudo-human was nothing like an insect. It was also nothing like I'd expected. I imagined that the entity wanted to present itself as human-like while maintaining clear distinctions. You will have to ask it for its precise reasons. I assumed Omu already knew exactly why the alien looked like it did. Her deferral was a not-so-subtle way to push me to begin conversing with the Hemru. The Hemru had finished examining Naomi's avatar and turned toward me. "Well, here we go." "Hello, I am John Abrams Prime. Welcome to the Earth," I said formally as I stepped to face the alien. The greenish-skinned humanoid stood higher for a moment before dropping to the floor of the chamber and prostrating itself. As it did, it began emitting strange whistling noises interspersed with a series of clicks. What the hell? The reanimated intelligence of Hemru Origin's words translate roughly to, "Prime Queen, I submit to thee." Naomi interjected directly into my thoughts. Beside me, I heard Omu emit a small snort. I glanced at the android's virtual image, which rolled its eyes at me. I sighed. Somehow I expected this wouldn't be the last time I heard this new designation. I returned to studying the alien as I considered how to respond. I noticed that despite the prostrate alien's forehead remaining in contact with the ground, the two antennae swiveled as if tracking me. They must be functional in providing some data to the alien. "Hello, Ambassador," I said, less smoothly than I'd have liked. I stepped forward and knelt, gently grabbing the prostrate woman's arm and encouraging her to stand. "Please stand. I would have us be equals and friends. I am known as John Abrams Prime, but please call me John." The Hemru regained its footing. I noticed it did so rather awkwardly and unbalanced. I remembered that the Hemru were supposedly a multi-legged species. This bipedal form must be strange for it. "Jajon, John," it said slowly as it tested its pronunciation of my name. The alien's voice was definitely feminine, surprisingly throaty and rich, almost a singer's voice. After stating my name correctly, it continued, "Equals, friends, incongruities. I am powerless. You wield planetary rule. Truth. Explain?" The alien figure remained with her head bowed, not quite meeting my gaze. The antennae remained fixed on me, though. I wondered if they were light receptors or maybe sound. Could they be radar? "Yes, that is true, but you are not powerless. I respect your knowledge and the species you represent. This grants you limited power out of proportion to your actual circumstance. I would treat with you as equals out of mutual respect and friendship," I replied. The Hemru looked up slightly and angled its head this way and that as if it were a dog listening to a whistle. Finally it spoke. "Doubt, hesitation. I will proceed with this premise without commitment until a pattern is confirmable." Ah. Trust but verify. Well, despite my flowery words, I'd probably do the same. "Agreed. What is your name?" I asked. The Hemru responded with a long series of whistles and clicks. This was followed by, "But as I understand, this full designation is unpronounceable by most humans. Ch.12 is an acceptable derivative. Another acceptable alternative is Riho, a designation bestowed upon me by Kella Uxa Abrams." Some of the alien's response had sounded different. I was about to ask when Naomi spoke into my mind. I am actively augmenting and translating the alien's speech in an attempt to reduce discontinuities. This should lessen as it better learns our language. Ah, that explained it. I considered the alien's choices of names. It had vocalized the first alternative name with a click in the middle. I tested the word silently and was unsure how to articulate the click. The second choice, Reho, was simple and easy to pronounce. I wondered how Kayla had arrived at that nickname. "Riho?" I whispered out loud towards Omu. "Reanimated intelligence of Hemru origin, John," Omu replied, loud enough for the Hemru to hear. Kayla started calling the Hemru that early on in their interactions. The designation apparently is still in use. "Riho, I like it," I replied before turning back to the Hemru. "Ambassador Riho, I am glad to finally meet you in person. Here in virtual." I held out my hand. The Hemru, Riho, I reminded myself, studied my offered palm for a moment before returning a single, precise, and exaggerated handshake motion. Its grip was firmer than I expected, considering the alien's smaller female form and its previous submissive posturing. Next, I introduced Omu. "This is my android companion, Omu. I know you asked for no AIs to join us, but some are required to keep the simulation operating." Riho turned and inspected my friend. "A virtual representation of an independent artificial intelligence?" it asked. Omu confirmed Riho's questioning statement. The Hemru then started speaking to Omu with a rapid series of whistles and clicks. After a moment, Omu answered using the Hemru's language. The back-and-forth exchange continued for half a minute before the alien finished and returned its focus to me. I was about to ask Naomi why it had not translated, but Omu beat me to it. The Hemru was verifying the control limits of both my ability to self-replicate and my inclination towards self-preservation. Apparently, my responses sufficiently negated many of its concerns. The species appears highly aware of the risks involved with self-replicating and self-determining AIs. A full translation will be available for your review later. Riho then gestured towards Naomi's sunflower avatar. Another virtual representation of an independent artificial intelligence? It asked me, this time in my language. Yes, this avatar represents Naomi, an AI which was created early on to aid me in overcoming the assemblage, I explained. Ambassador Riho tilted its head at Naomi's icon. I have heard of it. Since I was made aware in this place, this intelligence has avoided interacting with me. Yes, Naomi works mostly behind the scenes. Its primary responsibility is safeguarding me. Will you permit me to question it? Riho asked, again with a tilted head. I noticed she also made strange hand gestures when she spoke, almost insect-like gestures. I noticed that unlike with Omu, the alien asked for my permission before grilling Naomi. It must think Omu a lesser intelligence. I gestured that she could proceed and added subvocally, Naomi, please cooperate with Ambassador Riho. If you have any concerns, let me know privately. The Hemru faced Naomi's sunflower and started whistling and clicking. Naomi responded when appropriate, using the same form of speech. This time, the grilling went on for over 2 minutes. Occasionally, the Hemru would look towards me and gesture as they conversed. I was apparently part of their discussion. I glanced at Omu. Apparently, the method used to impose limits on Naomi's freedom of action is a cause of concern for the Hemru. They have never tied the continuity of an artificial intelligence to the continuity of a living person in such a manner. Ambassador Riho is asking a series of detailed questions probing the limits of Naomi's self-determination in the event of your, demise, the android explained subvocally. The back-and-forth chittering eventually came to a stop, and the Hemru turned its attention back to me. I waited for a moment, but it just remained standing there silently. I capitulated and spoke first. Are your concerns about Naomi and Omu sufficiently addressed? Partially, a unique solution to a persistent threat, one that will require further study and contemplation. I thank you for allowing my questions, it responded neutrally. I've been told that you have spent your time here learning of my race and of our abilities. Riho bowed her head a moment. I have learned much. I commend you for your advancements in spatial transport. My species has no similar technologies. And you know of our plan to use our discoveries against the enemy? I probed. A logical utilization of such technology. It is likely you will sink your mandibles into your foe while it remains unaware. We have found no data in any assemblage archives we have recovered thus far, which indicates that the enemy is aware of such spatial piercing technology, Ambassador Riho stated. What if we wipe the assemblage out completely? I probed. Improbable. All previously established assemblage colonies will need to be discovered and eradicated for such to come to pass. Our efforts in backtracing the route of the enemy to discover such colonies have proven difficult. The distances are vast and the colonies develop quickly and quietly. While not directly saying it, I got the impression that humanity's plan to genocide the assemblage didn't disturb the Hemru in the slightest. How will the Hemru species react to humanity if we physically reach each other? I asked. The greenish-skinned woman stiffened slightly. Both its antennae swiveled and seemed to lock onto me. Hemru reactions will vary depending on your intentions if such an occurrence comes to be, it deflected. I considered the Hemru's response. I sensed it was being carefully truthful rather than evasive. Will your species see us as a threat? I probed. This time Riho reared back as if I had slapped it. It shifted and tilted its head far to the right and to the left for a long moment. Finally it answered, Ha, ha, ha. I apologize if my response is incorrect. I am having trouble understanding the interrupted defense mechanism humans refer to as humor. It then leaned forward as if relaxing slightly. Since any rational being would immediately grasp that the only logical way to consider a species possessing the ability to quickly eradicate your mortal enemy as a possible threat, I deduce that your question is an attempt at humor. I guess my question was somewhat ridiculous when considered in that way. Yes, but in all seriousness, how will the Hemru respond to humanity, assuming we destroy the assemblage arc vessel? Logically, the Hemru species will be cautious. If what you describe comes to pass, you would have demonstrated your species' power and potential. Even more so if humans manage to bridge the vast gulf of space between our worlds and make actual physical contact. If we manage to do both, can there be peace between us? I asked carefully. The alien again considered me for a long moment. I had a feeling that my simple questions were confusing it for some reason. It was clear that the Hemru species, or at least this member of it, was less emotional and more logical thinking than the average human. I was worried about our own response for a moment before I remembered that we now had AIs to help guide and direct our impulsiveness. The Hemru response will of course be proportionate to the actions of your species. It cannot be any other way, Ambassador Riho responded. So if we treat you as friends and seek a mutually beneficial relationship? I asked. Harmony is a worthwhile goal. The peaceful coexistence of our species would result in synergies far beyond the solitary, Riho said sagely. It had appeared to relax somewhat, slumping down and waiting, only its antenna moving. Both species already possess technology to bridge any simple physical differences in our appearances. I nodded. My gut impressions about this alien had solidified. I now felt that this species was rational and pragmatic. We would have to guard ourselves and act miserly with our secrets early on until this is verified over the long term. But I felt there was hope for a stable relationship with the Hemru. Speaking of appearances, Ambassador Riho, I have to ask why you chose this form for your virtual appearance. It's not a normal human, and from what I understand, it's vastly different from your species' original appearance. Early on, after I was brought to awareness in this place, I learned that the majority of humans would be horrified by the Hemru physical form. To arrive at a suitable alternative depiction, I studied your visual sagas for examples of fictional depictions of aliens with which humans have had successful interactions. This virtual image was created as a hybrid from many examples, as she had said that Riho had run her hands up and down her nude, greenish-skinned human figure. In addition, I choose a female form to appear less threatening, as for some reason your species has an instinctive bias towards male dominance. Were you a male before? I asked. No. I, like the vast bulk of the Hemru species, was what you would consider female. I was curious about that statement, but decided to wait on asking more until the rest of the party joined us. I did have one final request for the Hemru while we were still alone, which was to see the alien's true appearance. Could I handle it? Would I react in terror as it predicted? I hoped humans were more evolved than that, but I'd better find out for sure. Please show me the true form of your species, I asked. I want to discover if what you suspect is true. I will do as you instruct, it replied grudgingly, although I fear this may prejudice you against my species in the future. The Hemru repositioned itself slightly to stand fully in the center of illumination. As I watched, the green-skinned female figure slowly morphed into the true image of the Hemru. I thought I had steeled myself, but I still recoiled at what I was seeing. The Hemru form was indeed terrifying. I'd known they were insect-like, but that did little to prepare me for the sight of a 2-meter-long cross between a grub and a hard-bodied insect suddenly appearing in front of me. The true form of the Hemru was a long, multi-segmented, arthropod-like creature. It had 8 legs with pairs attached to the middle 4 segments. The frontmost segment had no legs and was what I assumed was the head. Likewise, I assumed the rearmost legless segment was the ass end of the alien, but it remained pointing away, so I was not sure. The creature swiveled its forward 2 segments upward, which allowed it to stand. As it did, I started to unconsciously back away and had to force myself to remain in place. Now standing, the Hemru's upper segment head was now a bit over 1 meter above the ground, or slightly higher than my abdomen. In this position, the forwardmost pair of legs now resembled arms, while the other 6 remained in contact with the ground, forming a stable platform. I inspected its hands and saw that they were far more intricate and dexterous than its more powerfully clawed 6 lower limbs. Of course, since the Hemru had evolved to become tool makers and users, they would have fully developed and capable hands. The head segment swiveled forward to face me. I immediately noticed the creature had 8 eyes on short antenna stalks ringing the perimeter of this segment. 4 of the eye stalks focused on me, leaving the remainder swiveling around to monitor the rest of the canopy chamber. There would be no sneaking up on a standing Hemru. Centered inside the ring of eye stalks was the alien's mouth. For a moment, I wondered where the alien's brain, or brains, were located but dared not ask. The circular maw had 8 wicked sharp-looking flexible mandibles, ringing the central opening, and I was reminded of the round sucker-like mouth of a lamprey eel. Even worse, each mandible was constantly in motion with a short circular thrusting oscillation pattern. I had no doubt that the efficient-looking mouth could quickly grind through bone or a similar hard carapace to get to the juicy goodies inside. Yech! I shuddered and quickly switched my focus away from the mouth to one of the eye stalks currently staring back at me. The ocular tip was a wettish-looking, solid black half-sphere, lacking a visible iris or lids. I felt myself involuntarily shiver again and took another deep breath in an attempt to regain control of my reactions. The flight instinct, forget the fight option, was fighting for control of my body, and I was about to let it win. Omu reached over and took my left hand. Of course, the android would know of my long-established phobias. Surprisingly, her touch helped a great deal, and I felt myself calm. The Hemru, Riho, I had to remind myself, noted the actions of my companion with the same tilted head, posturing that it had shown while in its human-like representation. After a moment, it extended its right upper arm. This time, I was the one who hesitated as I studied the alien's attempt at a greeting. Finally, I found the courage to extend my own palm forward to return its greeting. The strange-looking hand was warm. It was also more flexible than I imagined, almost feeling like flesh. When we released our mutual grip, I noticed that the Hemru's palm had had many small facets. I was reminded of Omu's fine scales, except that while the androids were perfect hexagons, the Hemru's facets were many shapes and sizes. Our second greeting complete, the Hemru stepped back and slowly swiveled in place, allowing me to get a good look at its full form. When this was complete, it thankfully morphed out of the horrible insect-like shape and back into its earlier green-skinned female form. I felt myself relax almost immediately. "Wow, that was remarkable," I stammered. I'd said remarkable, but that was not the term I was actually thinking. The Hemru wasn't fooled. "I understand from my studies that your species has an instinctive fear of the arthropod body type similar to that utilized by the Hemru. This is why I have chosen a less fear-inducing virtual appearance. It is also why the biological shell being readied for my physical use will closely resemble a standard human's," Ambassador Riho said. I wasn't aware that plans to allow the Hemru to live in the physical world had begun, although this made sense in hindsight. There was no real reason to keep the Hemru locked in virtual, especially if we were going to consider it a true ambassador. "I'm sorry for my reaction," I apologized, "but I agree it's probably a good idea to stick with a human-like form, at least for now. I hope this isn't too much of a hindrance for you." "It is no burden. I look forward to the experience. Also, my natural Hemru form would be poorly suited to the cool and wet climates common on your Earth," Ambassador Riho explained. "When will your new shell be ready to receive your download?" I asked before adding, "And once in physical form, where will you go?" I'd added the last because I was curious about who would get to be the alien's minder. Would Xenius or Eudaimonia build it an android companion to watch over it? I doubted my daughter Kayla would leave the SRP to travel with the Hemru for the time required. Maybe one of the human directors would be appointed the responsibility for the Hemru. What if it was Director Karn Conlon? Would the director move to influence the alien against me? A suitable human-like physical shell has been found and is being modified. I am told it will be ready in 3 days. As far as where I would go, I would ask a boon from you, John Prime. "Of course, what is it?" I replied. Maybe it needed my help in arranging a means of travel. "With your permission, I would attend you directly at all times," the green-skinned woman said, this time without a tilting head expression. As the ambassador for my species, I should be immediately available to the highest authority on your world. Thus, my proper place would be as your subordinate under the role of attendant companion." Shit. I tried to think out of the request but could not come up with any good reason. I had the room on my island and I had ample means of travel. I was sure that having the ambassador with me would also elevate any need to physically travel and allow for quick access to the planetary wormhole network. Now that I thought of it, with the offensive against the enemy ramping up, maybe it would be good to keep the Hemru close. I would be more involved with the war effort in the coming months, and the alien's point of view would likely be helpful. Naomi, Omu, any reasons why this would be a bad idea? I asked subvocally. None, John. There are many logical reasons for promoting the idea. Regarding any potential security issues from the Hemru, be advised that the physical shell being prepared has enhancements in place to aid in our abilities to monitor its activities and act to prevent it from causing harm or mischief. You will be safe in its proximity, Naomi answered. Omu just nodded. I speculated for a moment at the nature of the enhancements Naomi had mentioned. Tracking devices, explosive artery poppers. Ugh. I decided not to ask. That would be great. I have plenty of room and would love to have you stay with me. Ambassador Riho tilted her head and looked at me curiously before giving a slight nod. As you rule, John. Still slightly dazed by the request I had just granted, I just nodded back in reply. After a moment, Omu signaled that the others could join us. First, the 5 suspended icons of the AIs came to life next to Naomi. The AI witnesses were back online and with us. Outside the still-open entry to the canopy enclosure, another aperture formed. The virtual humans waiting in the lobby walked through the portal, led by Serenity. Behind her came a slightly nervous-looking Picket. Finally, a smiling Kella appeared. She had one arm around the late-arriving mystery member of our group. It was her brother and my only son, Alec. I stiffened and tried to keep control of my emotions. My relationship with my only son had always been somewhat strained. But the past 2.5 decades had been the most trying. Still, we'd begun to reconnect after I'd returned from my decade of wandering, and hopefully, our renewing bond would continue to grow stronger. Alec's virtual appearance looked similar to what I'd known from the past. I was pleased to see that it resembled the shell he'd been originally born with, a blend of his mother ox and my own shell from nearly 200 years ago. It was bald, gracefully lean, and had a very defined musculature. I was reminded of some martial arts movie star from the glory days of Hollywood. Even in virtual, he also moved with a smoothness and control that betrayed his vast training in martial arts and physical combat. Confident and intimidating at the same time, I could not help but be proud of my son. I stood aside with Kella as each new member was introduced in turn to the Hemru ambassador. I braced myself when Picket was presented and his origins revealed, but the Hemru simply greeted him as it had Serenity. I reasoned that it must have already been aware of the animated representative of our mutual enemy. Riho did indicate that she wished to converse with Picket privately at some point in the near future. Last to be introduced was my son. Riho surprised me by asking Alec detailed questions about his role in the planning and equipping the Vexatus expedition, humanity's attempt to establish a military redoubt at our nearest stellar neighbor, Alpha Centauri. The Vexatus, our third starship, was launched 25 years earlier and was due to arrive at our nearest stellar neighbor in only 70 years, or 4 decades before the assemblage arrived at the Earth. Again, I was impressed at how informed the Hemru was. The alien has certainly been busy learning about our society in the few weeks since its arrival. Alec answered the Hemru's questions without revealing any military secrets. Despite his careful answers, I could tell my son was proud of the mission he'd personally overseen. I found myself proud with him. The meeting continued for another hour. Serenity, Picket, and Alec were the most active in asking questions of the Hemru. I enjoyed simply being a spectator, as they were covering most of the questions I'd been curious about. I also knew that I'd have plenty of time to question Riho further once she joined me on my island. One of Picket's first questions was the main one on my list. It was a subject on which I'd already been informed, as it had been one of the first topics the AIs had debriefed the Hemru on. Ambassador Riho, can you provide details on any possible future attacks on this system from your homeworld? When I was transmitted here, I had been instructed to argue that humanity should ally with the assemblage on the basis of such pending attacks. It would be enlightening to learn if those suppositions were correct. Picket had asked intensely. At first, I wondered if his questions were an attempt to provide more evidence backing his plan that humans should call off our retribution offensive and instead work with the assemblage. But from his expression, I wondered if instead he was seeking to ease his guilt over his previous mission. Agent Pickett, the Hemru had answered. At the time my mentality was recorded, I have no memories of any such attacks having been launched, nor do I recall any plan for the future. It may have been that no plans were made, or that I was prevented from knowing about them. I am sorry. Pick seemed to wilt slightly. Again, I was unsure as to his motives. But, Ambassador Riho had continued, it would only be logical to assume that we would continue offensive actions against your species' wantonly destructive diaspora. That had been the conclusion of the AI Advisory Council as well. Humanity had two threats to face, the known assemblage threat and the hypothetical Hemru threat. Kayla was also a passive spectator, as were most of the AIs. Since the alien mind data had been installed into the SRP, they had already had many opportunities to converse with the alien. As the meeting went on, the direct questions and answers became fewer, and it became more of a conversation. It soon became apparent that although the Hemru may have been terrifying, at least to me in their physical appearance, their culture was far less alien than I feared. Instead of some insect-like hive-minded collective, they were quite capable of thinking as individuals. Also, there were enough commonalities between Hemru and human civilization that my inclinations leaned towards successful cooperation. I'd spoken of many of my concerns privately with Naomi. The AI assured me there was hope for peaceful coexistence with the Hemru if and when we became neighbors. They were a mature and logical thinking species who had advanced to their current levels much slower and more patiently than humanity had. The fact that they had been advanced enough to endure and overcome the assemblage said much. They would make good allies, and I resolved to ensure that they would come to see humanity in the same light. I did learn of one fact that I had so far been uninformed of. There was to be a virtual global forum to officially introduce Ambassador Riho to humanity. This was to occur in 2 days, or a day before she was to be downloaded into her new physical shell. Eudaimonia AI reported that the forum would be an information-only session with no policy changes being considered or voting taking place. I'd asked Naomi why I had not been informed, only to learn that the AI was acting under my own instructions to keep me in the background as much as possible. The AI had deduced that I would prefer to skip attending the forum as a formal virtual spectator and instead remain on my island and watch from the forum passively. I had to agree with its deductions. After being in the forefront of the previous global forum, I'd intended to step back from the public eye somewhat. My recent notable broadcast exploits from Vesta were a departure from that plan, which I intended to compensate from her by keeping an extra low profile for the foreseeable future. As our meeting came to an end, I explained to the group about the Hemru's request to join me in living on my island once it was in a physical body. I was happy when Serenity stepped up and took the lead on seeing to any preparations. She and Kala huddled with the Hemru around Zunius's avatar to plan the details of the transfer and discuss any special requirements. I overheard enough to learn that Ambassador Riho would be delivered to my island via wormhole sometime in the early evening of December 31st, 3 days hence. I knew Serenity had planned a beach party for that night, and wondered for a moment what the alien would make of humanity dancing naked around a fire. That reminded me of more details to worry about. I was having an alien come live with me. We'd have to adapt a room. Would the alien know how to bathe in a human shower? Or use a human toilet? What the hell would it eat? My rising worries must have been visible. It will be fine, John, Omu said calmly. Serenity and Kella will handle all the details. I nodded and decided to not worry about it. While I waited for them to finalize their plans, my son approached and motioned me to step away to a more private area. "How are you doing, Father?" he asked. I pulled him into a quick hug, which he stiffly accepted. "I'm doing well, son. I'm surprised to see you here. Not that I am upset to see you, just surprised." "Yeah, well, Mother talked to me," he said quietly. "She isn't pressuring you, is she?" "Not exactly pressure. You know how she is. She is so smart that if there is a logical reason for something, she will make sure you understand what that reason is." "Well, let's just say I now see the logic in her arguments," he said wryly. "I've tried to avoid involving you this time, son. We haven't finalized the attack plan yet, but we are still leaning towards a standoff attack only. Even so, if we do need to infiltrate the enemy vessel directly, We hope to handle it by mobile units and remotes, I explained. What if the place is filled with polymorphic software or EMP prism traps, Father? Biological attack units would be needed in either case. I just nodded. We all knew that had it not been for the biological attack units which had been used in the past, we'd not be here today. Back when I defeated the Master AI, its orbital complex had been hardened against standoff attacks and digital incursions. It was likely the enemy Ark ship was similarly protected. I know, son. Still, with what you went through after Vexidus left, I wanted to spare you undergoing something similar this time. What I went through? Don't you mean what you put me through, Father? He replied with just a hint of a snarl. I sighed. Only minutes into our discussion, and we were right back to the source of our strife of the past 25 years. I don't want to rehash that old argument, Alec. I still stand by my decision that having you re-shelled here on Earth after Vexidus departed was the right thing to do. He looked about to interrupt, but I stopped him with an upheld hand. But I will admit that what I did was wrong. I should have respected your wishes no matter how hard it would have been for me. He looked stunned at my admission. Dad, why the change of heart? That's not like you. Now it was my turn to have a sour expression on my face. Well, for one, what I went through a decade ago made me realize how frustrating it is to have someone you trust act against that trust. I paused for a moment to clarify my thoughts. I knew you wished to not remain active on Earth after you sent yourself off with the Vexidus as its crew. I just couldn't let you go, son. Your mother was so distraught. Well, I was distraught too. When I found out that Naomi had retained your mind data backup copy, it was too easy to simply order the AI to download the backup into a new shell. We remained silent as the source of our strife was laid bare. Finally, after nearly 30 seconds, Alex spoke. Well, I was mad, Dad, but I've gotten over most of that over the past few decades. As much as it bothers me that I am here and that there is another version of me active on Vexidus, and eventually thousands more on Alpha Centauri, I've learned to deal with it. Besides, with the new long-range wormholes, maybe not too far in the future, my mind data versions can be remerged. Who knows? I'd not considered that. Hell, if we were successful in taking out the assemblage Ark ship, the main reasons for the Vexidus mission would be rendered moot. We could use wormholes to establish a colony on Alpha Centauri long before the starship's arrival. We could even use the wormholes to regain contact with Vexidus while still in flight. Hell, we could do the same with the other departed starships, the Sovrana and the Averill. I'd have to talk about this with Naomi and see what the AI Advisory Council had planned along those lines. But getting back on topic, after Mom talked me into it, I contacted Praxia AI to offer my services, Alec explained. That was news to me. He must have read my expression. I asked the AI to not inform you of my actions, at least until there were viable plans which involved using me directly. I didn't want to worry you, Dad. I thought about it and realized that despite Alec's instructions, Naomi would have informed me if it felt confident that Alec would eventually be involved. That the AI had not yet done so indicated that that outcome was still a low probability. I've also been in contact with Hannah Venezia. We've been training together in virtual for the past few weeks. Hannah? Of course. If there was a chance that Alec would be used as some type of biological shock troop, then Hannah would want in on it. I realized that I needed to have a long talk with Naomi and Praxia about this. I would need to include my former wife in the discussion as it seemed she was the chief instigator. How is she doing? I asked, to deflect my growing ire. She is amazing. I've never trained with someone as determined and committed as her. I can see why you two are such good friends. I wanted to ask more about his statement, but decided to not press the issue just now, as it looked like the mini-conference between the ambassador, Kella, and Serenity was breaking up. We've got everything worked out, Dad, Serenity said excitedly as they approached. This is going to be fun. Fun? I was going to have an alien living with me.